Hello, this is Della from The Beauty of Play, and I'm going to share with you today the annual schedule that I have planned for my 4th grade daughter. I will say that this is just a framework and will likely change at some point because things just change when you're homeschooling. So here I have the blocks that we're going to do for the year. And beside them I have the number of weeks that we are going to attempt to do each of the blocks. And part of the reason this is just a framework, and part of the reason that I've undershot the number of weeks so much, is because inevitably a unit goes longer than we expect, or we pick up another unit of our own interests, and this changes. So I'm trying to be proactive this year and schedule less so that we can do more. This is our schedule, and again, it's just a framework. I really like to teach by feel of the energy that's happening in the day, and how much, how long an activity takes so that it's balanced out. This on the right, the main lesson, is something that we'll do every day, and then cursive, form drawing, Spanish, and math practice will happen every day or every other day. These things will happen depending on the unit that we're doing. Some of our read alouds during our history will just be part of our history unit, and then when we're doing some of our math units, capacity and special numbers, then we'll have a separate read aloud. And not included in this, for the first time, I bought the full year package of Dart from Brave Writer, and I'm hoping to get at least a few of those in. I actually bought it for the coaching program that they have, but we also use Brave Writer for language arts, so I'm looking forward to some of those darts. This is our enrichment loop, and if you have been following me for a while, you know I kind of do a combination of Waldorf and Charlotte Mason. We really like to delve into our main lessons, and so for our main lessons, I use our block feature. And this year, the first one we're going to do is watercolor and grammar. I have been watching last year Heidi with Twig and Berry Farm Homeschool. I think they are in Australia. And then Hannah with Pepper and Pine in California on Instagram do their watercolors over the years. This past year, and we've kind of dropped off last year doing much of the watercolors, and I want to pick that back up. So we're going to spend the first 2 weeks focusing on watercolors and grammar, because I want to teach watercoloring techniques and the ideals for grammar, and that's all that we will spend instruction time doing. We will use the techniques that we learn in these first 2 weeks for both of these throughout our writing, our narrations, our read alouds, and the Dart, and the art projects that we do for the rest of the blocks from what we learn in these 2 weeks. And then from there we'll do explorers, and I'm focusing on explorers because I just find the age of discovery to be a misnomer, because they really weren't discovering anything. Everything was already well populated, but also to be so dismal, because what it actually is European colonization. And so I'm switching that up so that we have a little more diversity. So we're just doing an explorers unit instead of doing colonization. So capacity unit is really measurement, so we'll work on a little measurement. And I kind of got ahead of myself last year, which I'm happy that I did, but we spent a lot of time on fractions last year, and I forgot the capacity and measurement main block. So I'm skipping back on that to go over that. She knows most of it just intuitively, but that will be a fun block to do in between our other blocks. And then we're moving on to the Renaissance, mostly art, but also the time period in Europe, and I'm really excited about that. Renaissance is one of my favorites, just because I find Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo and some of the artists during that time to be so interesting, especially Leonardo da Vinci. So we're spending some time on that, and Shakespeare will probably also be part of our poetry block. And then we're doing the traditional animal block. Well, I should say we're doing the traditional schedule for Waldorf, doing the animal block. I don't know that we will be doing the traditional animal block for Waldorf because I'm not exactly sure what that looks like, but I have an idea how I want to teach the animal block through how taxonomy differentiates animals. So I want to go through the taxonomic animal groups. And then special numbers, and these are things like triangle numbers, Pascal's numbers, spirals, Fibonacci. This is just another fun math block to break up some of the other longer blocks, and also to make math fun. This is the fun part of math. So, and then our last blocks will be physics. And if you look over here at my planning notebook, and just forgive my handwriting, I have placed the year, the weeks of the year, from August through the end of March on my calendar so that I can decide what units for us to do. And I have scheduled this intentionally. The wet on wet watercolor is easy, and the grammar also will be relatively fast and easy. And that is a great way to move into the year, something that is easy and fun, and we can get our feet wet and enjoy it without rushing headlong into the heavy stuff. And then I am doing units that are not necessarily of her choosing. So we'll go into the Explorers. We'll break with a fun capacity unit where we'll mostly be playing, measuring, weighing, pouring things in and out. And then we move into Renaissance and Shakespeare. And then this fourth week will be Thanksgiving week. Now, if you've been homeschooling for any length of time, you know about November, you really start dragging your feet. And the same thing happens in late February. So I have planned our blocks accordingly. The animal block, she adores animals, and this is going to be one of her favorite blocks. So I have placed that in the first 2 weeks of December so that it will be easier to work through the hardest part of homeschooling. And then when we have to pick up in January, and picking up after a break is always kind of challenging, it will still be something fun for her. This will be a typical block, so it will be a little harder than some of these easy blocks like capacity and special numbers. Because this is the end of the year, and always around the end of the year we are ready to be finished, I've got special numbers, which should be nice and easy, and physics, which will be very hands-on. And I think that will make the end of our year go easier. So that is my idea for this year. The Charlotte Mason part of this is that we have an enrichment loop here. We also use narration and copy work. Not a whole lot of dictation, but we do use narration and copy work, which is very Charlotte Mason. We also have a book of centuries, which is also very Charlotte Mason. But we have this enrichment loop, and if you've not heard of loop scheduling before, the way this works is you just have a list, and you don't have a day set up for the subject or the lesson that you're doing. Just when you do the lesson, say geography, then you move on to the next lesson, art study. And so the days that these things happen can change, but you just move from one to the next. So this is our enrichment loop. This is slightly different than last year. We've added writing because she's getting a little older and I want to add free writes into her schedule. So geography, art study, art, music study, poetry, and nature study are all the things that we've done from last year, and we're adding writing this year. The other thing that I've done, and I've made this for myself, this is math objectives. If you've been following me for a while, you know I don't use a curriculum to teach math because I enjoy math so much. But one of the challenges with enjoying math so much is that sometimes we have to go back and redo mastery because I play with math so much. So this is a worksheet for me to remember what to review this year and the new things to introduce, and that we have practiced and mastered those skills. So this is for me to keep up with her math. And then this is the letters that I plan, the order that I plan to introduce the letters with for cursive. If you remember from last year, I used form drawing as an intro into cursive. So the other thing that I have is I've chosen our different artists from relatively the time period. You'll notice that I left out Michelangelo, Botticelli, Raphael, and Leonardo da Vinci, and that's because we will specifically be focusing on them during our Renaissance work. And then the music that I've chosen are Haydn, Mozart, Beethoven, Wagner, Tchaikovsky, and Brahms. So I get these. We have a Renaissance artist, Go Fish Game. This is from Birdcage Press. And it comes with a little book, but it also comes with cards for the different artists with information on them and different pieces of art. And so I've chosen the artists that we're going to be doing out of a combination of that and this book, A Child's Introduction to Art. I've chosen the music that we're going to be doing from this book, The Story of the Orchestra. Some of the math reference book that I've used is Galegno's work, Making Math Meaningful from Jamie York. This is a source book for grades 1 through 5. I love this book, Mental Math from Dale Seymour Publication. And then I'll also use Right Start, but that hasn't come in yet. Because she's moving into grade 4, we're going to step it up in our form drawing with Angela Lloyd's second book. And the watercolors that I'll be using for the first week, I'm going to use this book suggested by Hannah with Pepper and Pine. It's also by Angela Lloyd. And so we're going to work our way through some of this book for the first 2 weeks of watercoloring. And then I also am using some online tutorials from Waldorfish, from Brian and Robin, and then Earth Institute, I think. But those were for training for me. And this Color Dynamics book will be what I will be using for her. And then we are also going to use for grammar Michael Clay Thompson. I really like him. If you do his entire program, it's pretty intense, but it is obvious from his work that he loves language. And I really love the visual representation, like this right here, that he has showing the relationship between the noun and verb and the other parts of speech. So that is what we're going to be, hopefully, doing for this year. Thanks for following me. See you next.